We will soon hear from Angela Glover Blackwell and Fred Blackwell. Yeah, give it up for them. But before we get to it, we actually will have a performance by the San Francisco Bay Area Theater Company. And this came up earlier, the I Too Am America, Sing America, the Langston Hughes poem. We will actually have the theater company perform a piece from the Langston Hughes poem. But before we get there, I wanted to very, very quickly acknowledge that we, and I think we might have shared this yesterday, but we are celebrating the 10th anniversary of the Opportunity Youth Forum and Fund. We launched back in 2012, and here we stand 10 years later, having learned so much on our journey. And as we think about the celebration of 10 years of documented impact, including the documentation of effective pathways, accelerated system change, cross-sector and system partnerships that have been transformative, it's also a celebration of growing our impact. Because over the past 2 to 3 years, we have more than doubled the number of rural and tribal partners in the national network. We added new tribal communities from the pueblos of Jemez, Laguna, and Taos, in addition to Cheyenne River in Hawaii. We added new rural communities from Gallatin and Park counties in Montana, in addition to Missoula, Montana. We also added a community from Roaring Fork Valley in Colorado. And then, to add to the rich diversity of urban communities, we added the Twin Cities, San Antonio, Newark, Houston, and Buffalo. Give it up for all of our new community partners. But celebrating the growth of our network is second to celebrating the work of our community partners, lifting up the many ways that all of you work year after year to achieve impact in partnership with and on behalf of youth and young adults. There's so many stories to lift up and celebrate, including the great work in Del Norte and Tribal Lands, who recently celebrated 10 years of the Building Healthy Communities initiative with a documentary film premiere and a big announcement. With the Yurok tribe as the lead applicant, Del Norte and Tribal Lands was recently awarded a $30 million 5-year Promise Neighborhood grant focused on the implementation of community-driven solutions from cradle to career. Yeah, give it up. But that's not all. Working in partnership with the Yurok tribe in Humboldt area, the Wild Rivers Community Foundation just launched the Pacific Redwoods Missing and Murdered Indigenous Peoples Crisis Action Fund in support of Native leaders' efforts to address a devastating pattern of violence and injustice. They are working together to raise awareness, advocate, increase resources, and address this crisis in North California. And in Chicago, our community grantee partner, Thrive, is building on a successful strategy of neighborhood-based hubs aimed at reconnecting young adults to a range of education options and supports. And to really bring impact and meaning to this work, they also recently launched a Youth Leadership Council. And this council is meant to help them advise the broader city on future-facing efforts related to Opportunity Youth. And our partners in Greenville, Mississippi. The local collaborative partners in the Delta are working to expand and deepen their work from Greenville and Washington County to nearby Sunflower and Clarksdale and Coahoma County. Especially, they're looking to expand and scale workforce pathways. This includes not only engaging young people, but bringing together resources from Walton Family Foundation and the U.S. Department of Justice. So they are blending and braiding public and private funds to continue to expand youth entrepreneurship pathways. But that's not all. In San Antonio, the Northside Independent School District, which, by the way, is the largest school district in San Antonio, committed to replicating the collaborative's Next Level Re-Engagement Center model, housing it in the Family Support Center, and committing 3 years of coaches and fundings to expand this important work. And in Newark, the collaborative awarded contracts to 3 local CBOs, all aimed at designing and implementing action plans to serve more youth through replicating Youth Build Network, Newark's lead charter school model, which essentially allows CBOs to leverage per pupil funding for sustainability. What I'm trying to tell you all is many different stories across many different places that lift up and highlight not just community infrastructure and capacity, not just centering the needs of youth and young adults, but also bringing together private resources to leverage public resources so that this work can be both scaled and sustained for the long term. And those are just some of the many stories that I could lift up. However, what I think is most important for me to note, what's most important for me to say, is that in addition to recognizing and celebrating our communities here in the US, it's also important to know our global network, because we do, in fact, have partners with us here today from Brazil, from India, and from Kenya. Thank you to those of you who traveled so far to be with us here today. So when we talk about the movement, I just want to make sure y'all know we are talking about a global movement of opportunity youth. But the other thing that's really important to note is that all of this work, all of the great success, all of this has taken place in the backdrop of COVID-19. And of course, we know, we're all fully aware of how the pandemic has wrought grief and loss, not just in communities, but especially in communities of color. But across our communities, we know that they have not only continued to work together, but have identified new ways of working with employers, including, for example, implementing summer youth employment virtually, new ways to expand broadband access to areas previously disconnected so that young people could be connected to mental health supports, especially during this time. And these are not even the most impressive stories to tell, because here in San Francisco, in New Orleans, in Hopi, just to name a few places, young people have been and continue to be on the front lines of organizing in real time to disseminate meaningful supports to young people and families and communities impacted by COVID. Across our network, communities leverage their infrastructure and capacity to organize across sectors and systems, bringing partners together, not just to improve outcomes for youth and young adults, but continue to drive that impact across the broader community. It's important to say, however, that even before COVID-19, our network understood the history of systemic racism and how it has played out in underserved communities, including how it has historically across generations impacted communities of color. And our communities have always understood the value of working across systems and sectors to improve outcomes for young people who deserve a meaningful, relevant, responsive second chance. And our network has understood the power of relationships to transform systems and lives. You know, the power of transformative solidarity, which we're going to get into and talk about right now and throughout our time together today and tomorrow. Most important, the collective we of our national network, our communities, partners, and many stakeholders have always believed in the voice, vision, and power of our youth and young adults. See, the story of our network, the narrative, is a narrative of vision. We've always held a vision of systems performing in more equitable and just ways, systems that serve every young person and connects them to a path of purpose. The story of our network, our narrative, is a story about understanding history and its generational impact on place, because from the beginning, we have been learning about and working to address and dismantle structural racism. Our network story is a story of community power building, because we have always worked nationally and supported communities locally to center the vision and voices of youth and young adults. And the story of our network is a story of healing, healing that is tied to advocacy so that young people and communities can function in their purpose in spite of the odds and challenges that they may face, to realize a vision for equity and justice that they hold in their hearts. And as I tell this story, as I lift up the elements of our network story, vision, understanding the history of structural racism, investing in community power building, centering community voice, and creating spaces for healing that are tied to advocacy in ways that not only expand equity and justice, but serve to build a more inclusive future, I am lifting up the elements of the Buffalo story. Our partners in Buffalo, the Community Foundation for Greater Buffalo, led by the visionary Mrs. Clotilde Perez Bode de Decker, and the one and only Felicia Baird, have been working across systems and sectors They have been working with so many partners to promote a racial equity agenda since 2006. And after the recent act of violence committed against the community, stakeholders are continuing to come together to support each other and deepen their commitment to this work. I want to close by lifting up the voices of our partners in Buffalo. And as I was preparing for today, Felicia sent me the following statement. The Community Foundation for Greater Buffalo identified racial equity as a priority in 2006 and drilled down on our efforts to achieve racial equity in 2015 with the establishment of the Greater Buffalo Racial Equity Roundtable and a 10-point agenda. It is because of the work we have been doing along with our community partners, including faith institutions, that our community was able to come together as one to mourn and support each other. We know that our city is imperfect, but in the midst of this racially motivated attack, our Main Street divide was dissolved, and we are consoling each other. My prayer is that our unity lasts beyond the mourning period. We have a lot of work to do to ensure that what we are experiencing is long-term, but our community is resilient, and I am hopeful. We ask that the attendees keep us in their thoughts and prayers. Felicia also noted that for those of you who want to donate to Buffalo, we have this information available and it's posted on various boards throughout the convening. But in addition to sharing Felicia's words, I also want to lift up the voice of Mr. Sherman. Sherman is a young leader from the Buffalo community, and he and I literally ran into each other last night. And I said, Sherman, I've been hearing stories about you for some time. Because see, when we kicked off our digital learning series last year, Buffalo was the community that launched I should say, a deeper, nuanced understanding of what it means to bring community partners together for 16 years to drive a racial equity agenda that's tied to expanding economic mobility while also civically engaging youth and young adults in shaping the future of the community. And Sherman's name was in every conversation as we were planning for that session. And I want you to know what Sherman said when I talked to him last night. When he and I was talking, Sherman, as he was looking at me, optimistically, I want you to know his eyes were shining when he noted that he is confident that the community vision of turning this moment into a broader movement would come to fruition because his community has been doing this work, has been laying the foundation of cross-system and cross-sector partnerships. Leaders of diverse backgrounds coming together to address challenges has created the infrastructure necessary for this moment. And as he and I discussed last night, and Felicia and I have emailed about over the last couple of days, our network stands with them as they continue this important transformational work. And so I'll say once again, in the spirit of transformational solidarity to our partners in Buffalo, our network stands with you. In closing, I want to make sure that what I'm lifting up here is a story, yes, a story of resiliency, but also a story of being committed to the long-term 10 plus, 15 plus, 20 year plus work of investing in leaders. We heard this morning from Karen Pittman and Starsky and Kim Pham, investing in the type of leaders that can bring the future, this future of equity and justice, a more inclusive democracy, into fruition. And with that, I cannot think of a better way to introduce our opening art program, and then that will be followed by Ray Coleman, our long-term partner from the California Endowment, who's gonna moderate this plenary with Angela and Fred. But here's the thing about the San Francisco Bay Area Theater Company. It is a company that unites artists and audiences through live theater that is reflective of the authentic perspective and history of the San Francisco Bay Area. Today, they will perform excerpts from their award-winning show, I Too Sing America, which brings the poetry of great American authors to life through original music and movement. Please welcome to the stage Rodney Earl Jackson Jr., Anthon Jackson, Jocelyn Thompson Jordan, Zuri Montgomery, Orion Harris Santiago, Nasha Harris Santiago, and Sarah Zhuang. Thank you.
have just seen a beautiful thing, slim and still against a gold sky. A straight cypress, sensitive, exquisite. A black finger pointing upwards. Why, beautiful, still, black finger, are you black? And why are you pointing upwards?
Thank you for having us. This next piece is from a poem called 3,000 Lost Kisses. The night swoops to the hip-hop of gunshots and stars.
A young woman's teeth challenge everything. Ooh.
About sorrow's two case of explanations.
And I'm learning to hope like a bird learns its first affair with wind and sun.
Like an orange learns to take flight into a mouth of a boy in summer.
The trees are prophesying, and the mountains are waiting for the long trek to the sea. And the sea waits like a lover anticipating the kiss of 3,000 lost kisses. The kiss of 3,000 lost kisses. The kiss of 3,000 lost kisses. The night swoops and the trees begin their blue-black dance with a wind.
In Daddy's arms, I am tall and close to the sun and warm. In Daddy's arms, in Daddy's arms, in Daddy's arms, I can see over the fence out back. I can touch the bottom leaves of that big magnolia tree in Kiss and Suki's yard. Daddy's arms, the moon is close
closer at nighttime when I can almost touch it. And when it grins back at me from the wide twinkling skies, in Daddy's arms, in Daddy's arms, in Daddy's arms, I am tall. Taller than Benny or my friends Aid and George. I am tall.
Taller than Uncle Billy, and best of all,
I am eyeball even Steven with my big brother Jamal.
in my daddy's arms, in my daddy's arms,
Daddy's arms, high and strong, and dark like him, and laughing, laughing, happier than circus clowns with red painted grin.
When Daddy spins me round and round, when Daddy spins me round and round,
When Daddy spins me round and round
and round.
And when the whole world is crazy,
Upside down.
I am big and strong. I am big and strong. I am big and strong and proud like him. In Daddy's arms, in Daddy's arms, in Daddy's arms. My daddy. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Again, we're SF Backco. Thank you so much for having us. Thank you so much.
Time, you guys. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody. You guys doing okay? I'm from the Bay Area, so welcome to the Bay Area, home of the mighty Golden State Warriors. Any Warrior fans out there? Good luck tonight. Thank you, everybody, for being here. I want to thank the Aspen team for bringing us together after 2.5 years. It's really awesome to see everybody and be with you. You know, one of the things that I've reflected on over the last couple of years is the essentiality of just being in space with people, being in relationship, and I think that's important for us as we think about the work ahead. I'm very honored to moderate this particular panel today with two of my colleagues and heroes here on the panel with me. And, you know, the conversation today, which is about sharing the baton, intergenerational strategies for equity, is really a continuation of the conversation we've been having in this forum over the years. And as Monique said earlier in the first plenary, that the work that we're doing is really generational, intergenerational. And as I reflect on what's happening in the world today, the erosion of some of the things, some of the rights that we've taken for granted, I recognize that these issues of voting rights, racial justice, equity, reproductive rights, these issues are always being contested, right? we cannot take anything for granted because we don't have a shared story. We don't have a shared vision of what it's like to provide health, well-being, meaning for everyone in our community. So this idea of needing to transcend generations, building leadership, building movement, building organization across generations is such an important topic. And for today's conversation, we have the privilege of really exploring many of these themes from the personal experience of leaders like Angela Glover Blackwell and Fred Blackwell. I'll just say a couple of words about Angela and Fred, given my relationship with them. Angela actually hired me to help start PolicyLink 22 years ago. And she has been such a mentor to me, and I've learned so much from you, Angela. I really want to appreciate you for your leadership and for all the mentoring that you do. You may not even know it. To all the folks that have gone through PolicyLink, it's probably hundreds of leaders now and young people who've gone through PolicyLink, and you've left an imprint on all of those individuals who've worked with you. And Fred and I also have known each other for like over 25 years now, and as the leader of San Francisco Foundation and a partner of the California Endowment that, where I work, it's amazing to have a leader like you that's unabashedly committed to racial justice in philanthropy. And we look forward to partnering with you and seeing you really move the field to invest the kind of power building work that needs to be in place in order for us to achieve racial justice and equity. So here's how this conversation will go. Angela, Fred, and I will have a conversation for about 30 minutes or so. And then we're going to pause and have you all at your tables reflect on what Angela and Fred shares, and then think about what are some of the questions you may want to ask them, where we'll open it up for another 15, 20 minutes or so for Q&A, and then we'll wrap it up. Okay? All right. We'll start with Angela. And we'll just have a dialogue for the next 30 minutes. Angela, you've been doing this work for, 50 years.
50 years, you can say it.
And I want to be like Angela when I'm 80.
I am not 80.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
I'm not even close to 80.
Okay.
You went too far, Ray.
When I'm 65, I want to be like Angela. I want to ask you about your origin story. Like, what inspired you to get in this social justice work?
Oh, man. Hello, everybody. It is just such a pleasure to be here. I love the work that you all are doing, and I am just in awe of young people today because you all are leading the way. So it's my pleasure to be here. It's hard to say what inspired me to do this work because I've never done anything else. It's the only work I've ever had. So it wasn't like I was doing one thing and decided to do something else. But the reason that I have been able to stay in the work for so long, and the reason that I was just drawn to it, it's the only thing I ever wanted to do, is because I grew up in the 1950s in St. Louis, Missouri. And St. Louis, Missouri was both legally segregated and continued to be segregated even after it wasn't legally segregated the entire time that I was there. Two things were important about that growing up. The first was that racism was deep, really every place. And because of that, the black community was together and strong. So I both experienced awful racism with all of the things that you think about in terms of name calling and meanness and a sense of black people being of little worth on the one hand, and the most amazing black community you could possibly imagine on the other hand. that the adults did everything they could to make sure that the children were protected from the sting and burn of racism. And they did something else that was really special. They literally, psychologically, created scaffolding so that the black children in the middle class of St. Louis, and I have to add middle class because it was different if you were poor and black, but in the black middle class of St. Louis, these adults created scaffolding that allowed you to reach toward your full potential even as you were locked out of the mainstream. Whatever that meant, in terms of education, in terms of recreation, whatever that meant. And I grew up in a family that understood that what was happening in the black middle class was just a slice of what was happening to black people, and we had responsibility to make sure we knew what was happening to all black people and to do something about it. So the combination of seeing racism firsthand, experiencing this extraordinary nurturing, and having drummed into me that we exist as black people to be able to help black people. That's why we're here. And no matter what you did, that was all on your mind. So what else was I going to do? Especially since at the time that I came out of college, I went to Howard University. If you were thinking that you were going to have a job that was a professional, you could be a teacher, you could be a lawyer, you could be a doctor, you might be able to do something with a small business like a hairdresser or something like that, but there weren't many choices. And so with few choices and with this amazing commitment, of course I was drawn to social change. And I've done it at every level. I came out of college, I was an organizer, then went to law school, became a public interest lawyer, then started a community building organization, was a foundation executive, and for the past 20 years I've been doing policy work. So I really have seen it all. Nothing has ever caused me to think that I wanted to do anything else. We'll talk about this along the way, but I've seen a lot of impact and progress.
Yeah, one quick follow-up, and then I'll get to you, Fred. What made you focus on, what issue, so I accept what you said, like you had no choice but to be in this work. Mm-hmm. But what made you focus on the work around policy? I know you were a lawyer as well. Like what drew you to that?
Starting off as an organizer, I recognized that because of the training I'd had as a child, we were literally trained to be public speakers. You know, that we were trained to do that. I was trained on it at the dinner table, and then we were trained on it at church, and then we were trained on it in the youth organizations. So becoming an organizer was a good application of that training. And I realized early on that I could stand on a playground or a street corner and get people excited about an issue, angry, really wanting to do something, and I didn't feel I had enough to do with that energy. That's why I became a lawyer. As a lawyer, I did public interest law, and we were doing impact litigation, which really focuses on deep problem solving, not just winning the case for the individual, but trying to do something about what was happening to whole classes of people. It was there that I got introduced to the world of policy, because what we were often trying to do was to change a policy. And when we got into a negotiation with the agency that we were suing, that's where the real action happened. And so when I started the Urban Strategies Council, what we were trying to do there was to bring best practice to the community of Oakland, California, and get it embedded in policy. And that was just a natural step toward PolicyLink, which connects the wisdom, voice, and experience of people working for change in their local community to policy. Because what was obvious coming into the world, recognizing that racism and classism and other isms were really hurting individuals, it quickly became obvious that they were embedded in institutions, and the policies were advancing the negativity. And if we weren't doing work on policy, we were just solving the problems for an individual, leaving the institutions and the systems there to harm the next individuals that come along. So if you really wanted to do something, you had to focus on policy. That's how I got there.
Great. We'll get back to some of the other things. I know that was you crunched 30 years worth of work into like 10 2 minutes.
50 years worth of work.
That's
Ray. You
right.
already
So
made that point.
we'll come back. We'll come back. We'll come back. Fred. So,
Yes.
Fred, you know, obviously you came up during a different time, right? But also coming from this legacy of what Angela has done. What inspired you to do this work? Obviously, you had more choices now, right? Yeah. When you were growing up and when you were coming to be a professional, but yet you decided, hey, I'm going to do public service. Kind of what inspired you around that, and what motivates your work now?
Sure. Well, Ray, as you could probably tell, I got organized. So, I mean, I guess the story for me starts actually with my family, though. And my mom has told a lot of the story, a lot of the things that she experienced from her parents, I experienced from her parents, too. And from her, and from my uncle, who was her brother, David Glover. And so, you know, David ran an organization called Occur in Oakland. My mom was very active in Oakland as well, and both my parents had been active as long as I've known them. And so there's a part of this that was just kind of in the water for me. I often describe myself as the little kid in the back of the community meeting with the coloring book, wondering why everybody was so upset. But probably more importantly, when can we go home? But also, you know, I went to city council meetings. My parents had me walk in precincts to try to get people elected to city council. And so from a very early age, I was exposed to all of that stuff. And my parents went as far as to send me to the school called the Oakland Community School in East Oakland that was founded and run by the Black Panther Party. So at an early age, I was exposed to the concepts of social justice, economic justice, and saw how people work to realize that through being organized and doing organizing as well. But my dad's side of the family is influential too. My dad's in the back of the room. My dad's a doctor. And like most you know, young boys, I wanted to be just like my dad when I grew up. But the first time that I saw him drain a knee, I realized that I wasn't going to be a doctor. So that was motivational too. But my dad's parents grew up in South Carolina. As soon as they were old enough, they moved to New York, and my grandfather owned a bar and grill on 125th Street in Harlem, around the corner from the Apollo. And so I spent summers alternating between what my mom just described in St. Louis and what you can imagine it was like spending summers in a bar and grill on 125th Street. And so, you know, my grandfather told me two things. He eventually moved to Oakland, and he told me two things every day, and my mom knows this. My dad's gonna chuckle in the back. One is when you leave New York, you're not going anywhere. And the second, if it's not a Cadillac, it's not a car. And the reason why that had an impact on me is because I kind of came to the conclusion that my grandfather really loved Harlem. And that, you know, having a Cadillac was the symbol of having made it in Harlem. And so my whole kind of career path has been at the intersection of kind of social justice, economic justice, and place. And so I've worked in local government, I've worked in nonprofits, I've worked in philanthropy. But it's really been about working at that intersection.
Great, thanks for sharing your journey. So I'm going to kind of fast forward to what we're struggling with now. And Angela and I were talking earlier about just some of the challenges that we're seeing just happening every day. There's just news that feels like, you know, all the progress we've made is being eroded. And here in San Francisco, Fred, you know, you've done a lot of work here in economic development, but now as a foundation president around some of the challenges around racial equity and economic equity in San Francisco. So I guess what I want to ask here is, like, given your history and your experience, and thinking about some of what you've learned along the way, what are some of the lessons that you think are critical for negotiating the challenges that we have, that our young people and our partners are negotiating today?
It's a great question, Ray, and it goes back to a part of the story that I didn't tell about what has motivated me to do the work and the kinds of jobs that I've taken along the way, and that is 1992. I was actually working at the Children's Defense Fund. I know you all heard from Starsky a little bit earlier. It was my first job out of undergraduate school, and I was working for the Black Community Crusade for Children and doing college student organizing. And the Rodney King verdict came. And that was influential for me in a really interesting way and offers some lessons. You know, my mom described, we've been on a few panels over the last few months, and she described kind of her coming of age. And coming of age kind of at the tail end of the civil rights movement, but really kind of in the kind of heart of the Black Power movement. And how exciting it was during that time to be able to join something that was so on the edge, innovative, inclusive, and powerful. And when the Rodney King verdict came down, I was feeling a lot of emotions, as you can imagine, and was already in this work, but was frustrating about that moment was there wasn't anything to really join in my generation during that period. There wasn't the civil rights stuff. There wasn't the Black Power movement. So I think I'm actually part of a generation of folks who retreated to being like super professional about this work in that moment. You know, I'm a part of a generation of people who have spent a lot of time digging up, analyzing, cleaning up, and presenting data, disaggregated by race or, you know, different characteristics. Spent a lot of time like really fine-tuning the art of like the well-written memo. The nice PowerPoint with plenty of white space and lots of bullet points that like really try to get your point across.
I did the same thing, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, we're that generation. Like in the absence of being able to join something to channel all that outrage and emotion, and you're in this work, you professionalize it and you try to make the case. And you show up at work in a way that masks how angry you are so that you can try to get ahead and be influential. And what was powerful, just so powerful about the last couple of years, was that the outrage and the emotion of young people taking to the streets to basically say enough is enough swung open doors that I didn't believe were like imaginable. You know, the fact that I'm in a foundation boardroom nowadays talking about anti-blackness and white supremacy blows my mind. It blows my mind. For some people, it's like, duh. But for me, it blows my mind because I have spent a whole career trying to negotiate how do I bring this into the room. So I guess the most powerful thing that I can say is that we have to combine the professionalism with the outrage, and that emotion and anger has currency. And that when we combine those two is when we are probably most likely to win.
Let me, so Angela, you probably have an answer to that, but let me add, to build on that question and then draw you in to answer kind of what Fred did, but add this to it, because I think Fred's answer kind of lifted up several things that also resonate with me in terms of, you know, what you just said, Fred. Like, our board of directors is going through advancing racial equity conversations. And so I do think there's a shift at least in philanthropy and the places that we work, around this explicitness around engaging white supremacy and anti-blackness and racism. And I think this is connected to narrative, to a story, right? Like what you were saying, Fred, about not feeling like there was something to join. To me, well, let me pose it as a question. to me, this notion of movement joining something that's bigger than you requires a story, a narrative, a shared narrative around a vision for the future. Do you think that's true, Angela? Do we need a collective story? Is that what we need in order to create a bigger, more sustainable, intergenerational movement?
Yes, 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 to everything you said, and you.
And how can we do that?
Yes. And we have to have a narrative. And there's always a narrative. There's always a narrative, whether you are aware of it or not. And I just want to start with the negative before I go to the positive. We live in a nation that was founded on genocide for the purpose of stealing land and human bondage for the purpose of slave labor. Both this theft and this slave labor are the basis of everything that has been built in the country. Everything. The entire economic system is based on it. And it is justified, was justified, and continues to be justified by a narrative that includes a hierarchy of human value. And that hierarchy of human value is in everything that has happened at the policy level, in the institution building, in the way the economy works. And while you don't think about it, if you think about it, you realize that the only way that a nation can accept an educational system in which some children get everything plus and other children get nothing minus is because at a certain level, we're comfortable with that. We're comfortable with that. That if you walk out of here or any big city in America and you see people living in tents or with nothing at all and keep going with the day, just keep moving along, somewhere there's a narrative that makes that okay. So there's always a narrative that is running in the back of the nation's mind that is setting up and justifying the institutions that we build and the policies that we put in place. I grew up during the Civil Rights Movement, and the narrative was recognize the humanity of people who were black. That was the narrative, that there's something wrong in a nation that doesn't recognize the humanity of people who are black. When I went to college, the first day that I arrived in college, and I hope you all know this name, I was meeting with my advisor to figure out what my classes were going to be. And in walked Stokely Carmichael. I still feel the chills. I'm sitting there talking to my advisor. In walks Stokely Carmichael, who has finished, but he hasn't graduated. And my advisor, turns out, it was his sociology professor, and he needed that grade so he could get that diploma, and so he had come back to try to get it. Went through my time at Howard, watching what was left of the civil rights movement. The narrative did not speak to me. It spoke to my parents, but it didn't speak to me because my humanity was not in question, because I had grown up in that community that I just told you about. So when I came out and joined the Black Power movement, the narrative was, we have every right to be leaders. We have power, we just need to use it. Economic power, political power. That spoke to me because that's what I wanted to join. It pains me to hear that you came out and there was nothing to join. Hadn't really thought about it in that way, because Marion and I and others doing the Black Community Crusade for Children, we thought we were building it, but it wasn't authentic. It wasn't authentic. The adults were trying to build the Black Community Crusade for Children, to have a place for young people to join, but it wasn't authentic the way Black Lives Matter was authentic. That Black Lives Matter created a new narrative, and it's a narrative that a lot of people wanted to push back on. Not just people who were not black. A lot of people wanted to push back on Black Lives Matter because they wanted to say all lives matter. And what it took conversation, which is what made it so powerful, to help people see that all lives don't matter if Black lives don't matter. And it's only when Black lives matter that all lives matter. And that conversation has attracted people to it. Where we need to go now, Ray, in terms of narrative, is that we're in a moment, and I don't know how many of you had an opportunity to attend the PolicyLink Equity Summit in Chicago, April 2018. It's the last time that we had one. But the theme was our power, our future, our nation. And it was actually hearkening back to the Black Power movement in a sense. We have the power. We will control the future. But the addition was, and it is our nation. It is our nation to fashion, our nation to lead. We need to have a narrative that catches up with that, because it has to be something that can be shared, something that looks to the future, something that builds on the asset, which is our difference. And I'm not sure that we have quite got it yet. And I think that when we do get it, we'll be able to turn this tide. We're moving in the right direction, and I know you're going to ask some questions that will allow us to talk about that. We're moving in the right direction, but the pushback is extraordinary. We've got to find a narrative that energizes all the people who want a future that represents the reality of where we are, not the fantasy about where we've been.
Okay, I'm gonna take that. That was great, Angela. I'm gonna take that, add a nuance to it, and start with Fred, because what you just shared makes a lot of sense, but it's so hard to do.
If it weren't hard, it would have been done.
That's right. And even so this is one. I mean, even just like this is happening right now with in different communities of color. And particularly here in San Francisco, we've seen a lot of tension around education policy, around housing policy among communities of color. And this notion that you're talking about, Angela, which is the way I was reframing it in my mind, is around transformative solidarity, which Monique talked about. And I think before we even get to having this shared narrative, we need to even begin to think about, like, how can even we build solidarity among communities who we think ought to be on the same page. And I know in San Francisco, there's been a lot of things happening, certainly around policing, certainly around education policy, you know, the Lowell, the high school, and tensions between different communities, African Americans, Asian, Latino. And as somebody who's leading the San Francisco Foundation, Fred, what insight can you bring to really promote transformative solidarity so that all communities can thrive?
It's a great question, Ray, and I actually think it's, in our community, it's the question, to tell you the truth. And I have a few thoughts about it. One is, in the circles that I am in, I actually see more solidarity than I think people really realize. And I think the reason for that is because the clickbait for folks is to drill down on and really highlight in a caricature almost like way the divisions that exist in the kind of conversations that happen. And so I think that while they exist, they are the conflicts across communities of color are not as deep as we think. I'll start with that, but they're there. I think that there are a couple of things that are really important. One is, I think we've got to be able to hold multiple truths. That is really essential. This is not a binary thing. One community's gain does not have to be another community's setback. And we have to be able to simultaneously hold and be supportive of the racially motivated violence that is happening in the AAPI community. We've got to be able to hold the violence that is happening for folks who or have a sexual orientation that may not be mainstream. We have to be able to hold the pushback that is occurring around nativity and immigration, but we also have to be able to hold how a lot of that is impacted by what my mom talked about the origins of this country really revolving around the genocide and the pursuit of free labor, and be able to think about how all these things are interrelated, and we've got to be able to hold all of those together. That is one. And we've got to figure out a way to have the right conversations, right? We spend too much time not engaging in the right conversations because we are afraid that we might say the wrong thing, that it might be emotional, that somebody may get pissed off. And I'm as guilty as anybody else. I don't necessarily run into the room that is going to be emotional, angry, and where there's going to be tension. But we've got to get comfortable with the discomfort that is associated with all of that in order for us to get to a level of transformative solidarity. The last thing I will say, and I find myself doing this all the time, it's another quote from my mom. The pathway to everyone being successful is by focusing in on the folks who are least likely to be successful given the circumstances. And when we do that, everyone benefits. I'm sure that I don't have to go down the road of kind of quoting everything that is associated with the curb cut theory that she has talked about, where basically the advocacy from people with disabilities ended up in us having curb cuts to places where basically the street meet the sidewalk and people can use that. It was made for folks who had disabilities, but everybody uses it. It's the perfect example of how you kind of meet the needs of the folks least likely to be able to benefit. Everybody benefits. And so I think all those things are in the mix, Ray. But I think the real most important thing is that we really, really have got to get over the discomfort that's associated with these conversations.
Thanks, Fred. Angela, I'll give you a shot at that question as well. Transformative solidarity. How do we have the tough conversations, the real authentic, sustainable, enduring solidarity that's required, I think, for us to succeed?
I agree with Fred that within and among communities of color, there is a lot more said about the disconnects than actually exist. I think there is solidarity. As a matter of fact, it's routine solidarity, and it's definitely transactional solidarity. We definitely have, you sign my petition, and I will retweet your article. It's definitely, you come to my march, and I will speak to that funder about your issue. We're at that level, sure enough. That's done. Transactional solidarity. We cannot achieve what we want, though, until we actually are owning the struggle of our partners. It's not, I'll help you with your struggle. It's your struggle is my struggle. That until you succeed, I can't succeed. And that if it is happening for a group of people who can be identified, that if I can predict anything about your outcomes based on your group identity, then that hierarchy of human value that I was talking about is operating. And it is operating on you, therefore it is operating on me. When we get to that point, we have moved beyond transactional solidarity, and we have gotten to transformative solidarity. Transformative solidarity is a solidarity that is dependent on transforming the systems that have created the inequality, the inequities, and the unjust circumstance that we're in. And if we're working to really do something about all of those systems, we know they have to be transformed. And our solidarity is about that end goal. That's where we have to get to. And it's not that that's an uncomfortable conversation, it's that it's an unknown status. It's an unknown status. And so we're trying to talk about something that we've never quite seen, and that makes it hard. But let's talk about what's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable to talk about Black people. It's uncomfortable to talk about Black people. And I'm experiencing it right now. Not right now, but right now in this moment that we're in. Because ever since the summer of 2020, we have had a whole lot of important people who have leaned into a conversation about race. And by leaning into it, they joined those of us in this room who know that's the conversation we have to have. And we know that a lot of things are going to have to change, and the power structures are going to be disrupted to deal with it. And they're now feeling pushback like they have never felt before. We're used to feeling pushback, right? Every time we push, we get shoved. But a lot of people who have been able to say, like Jean-Luc Picard, make it so, have not been used to pushback. And now they're getting pushback. And their first response is, let's not talk about race. Let's just not talk about race anymore. I got it. I'm with you. I'm an ally. But let's not talk about race. Wink, wink. We know that it's about race, but let's not talk about it. Because by talking about it, we can't get those people who are way over there. We can't move forward in a way that makes me comfortable. So wink, wink, I'm with you on the race issue, but let's not talk about race. And I guarantee you, if we don't talk about race, we're not going to do anything about race. Because we keep solving these problems at a top level, thinking it's going to trickle down to the race problem. But when you solve it at the top level, you solve it at the top level, and that's just that. That's the biggest problem now. That's the conversation that we don't want to have. Those are my friends who are trying to step back from me now. And I'm struggling how to keep them on because they so shocked me with the way they came on strong, right? They shocked me. They shocked me when the head of J.P. Morgan Chase took a knee. I wasn't expecting that. It shocked me when the money that people were given got to be $100 million. I mean, I was used to trying to get 1,000. All of a sudden, people are given $100 million. This shocked me. I thought we were going to be in something, but it's very delicate. It's very delicate.
Yeah, so it's back to what we talked about. It's a perpetual struggle. These ideas, progress, it's all what we consider progress is always being contested. And so I guess I want to turn it to the audience in a couple of minutes, but let me ask this final question just to kind of bring some of this to practical action at this moment. What are either of you, what are you excited about right now? Like given the conversation we've had about what are we learning from the history, the challenges that we have right now around building a shared narrative and building transformative solidarity. What are you excited about right now that's an opportunity that if we try to exploit it using all the lessons and tools and intelligence that we have, that we should focus on?
I'll go first and let you end up. The reason I'm going to go first is because I can be quick on this one. I'm excited about all the money that is coming into our communities from the federal government. All this infrastructure money, this is big money. This is money like we have never seen before. And infrastructure is not just roads and bridges anymore. There's $100 million coming in for roads and bridges. There's 55, did I say million? See, I don't get the money thing, right? There's $100 billion coming in for roads and bridges. $55 billion is coming for water. And it's water really nuanced in the ways that we have to be focused on. $65 billion coming in for internet service every place. This is huge. And it comes at a time when lots of local jurisdictions are feeling pressure to make sure they advance racial equity with this money. We've got to build a civic infrastructure to be able to make sure that we hold that accountable. But I'm very excited about that because that's the tip of an iceberg. That represents a lot of policy work, a lot of advocacy work, a lot of political work to have that happen.
Fred.
That's right. I'm going to come at this a little bit in a strange way, Ray, and that is I think that a lot of the pushback that we are receiving and even some of the violence that we are experiencing is a result of the fact that we actually have a winning narrative. So while it is painful, and while the moment is one that actually instills, having a conversation with staff at the San Francisco Foundation about the current moment, and the amount of fear that folks are feeling right now is real. But I really think that the pushback that we are receiving, like I said, is a result of the fact that there's a winning narrative.
That's right.
There is a army of people like the people in this room who are equipped not just to advance a winning narrative, but to really move on it and execute on it in very sophisticated ways in multiple sectors. And so what I'm excited about is how we're positioned. I'm excited about how we're positioned. I'm excited about how we're positioned in this moment, with the doors having swung open to have a different kind of conversation, a more real kind of conversation. There's obviously room to grow, but I think that we are headed there. So I'm excited about when I look around, who I see with me. Multiple generations of folks who are in this fight. And the last thing I will say is one of the advantages that we have is we are not burdened with trying to hold somebody back. We have an affirmative, uplifting message that is about making sure that everybody has the opportunity and actually does thrive. And not only is that a winning message, it is unburdened by having to look back and say, how am I going to hold this person back? And I think that that burden will ultimately leads to those folks losing.
Great reframe, Fred. All right. Okay. We're going to pause. Fred and Angela, thank you for sharing all of those insights for now. We're going to pause for a minute, and we'll come back. I'm sure we'll get a lot of good questions and after we get a little breather here. But for now, we want to have you reflect and think about the conversation we just had and also some of the questions that we had. It would be great to hear, especially for the young people, about what is resonating for you now in terms of what you want to join, what you want to advance, that we as adults, as elders, could be a partner for. So for the next 5 or 6 minutes or so, reflect on the conversation we just had. Think about what's resonating with you. What are some of the questions you want to ask Angela or Fred, or what you want to offer to us and to your colleagues out there? Okay, so you got 6 minutes. It sounds like you guys are having a great conversation. That's great. Here's what we could do. Hello, everybody. I'm bringing you back.
Just keep talking.
If you hear my voice, clap once. Twice. All right. It works. All right, everybody. Hope you had a great exchange with your table mates. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to start with the youth leaders, youth organizers, youth activists out there who have either a question or a comment or a reflection. And let's take a few of them so that we can compile some of those questions and then have the panelists respond. So, and there's Ryan. You're the one with the mic. Yes.
Thank you. Shaquana Boykin, sit on the National Council of Young Leaders with Opportunity Youth. And I am a part of the well-being research. And I just want to make a statement, just that this group that I was able to be a part of, Fresh Tracks Community Solutions, and Annie Casey Foundation, and just everybody who were able to help us. When we talk about youth-led, and when we talk about experiences, we don't want to be tokenized, and we want to be given the tools and the resources to do our own research. And that means when you bring us to the table, Do not bring us to the table after you made your idea.
After you made the what?
We need you to be authentic, and we need to be engaged at the beginning. And if you feel like we don't have the tools, give us the tools. You have to step back a little bit in order for us to actually build the communities that is for us. If adults is only doing things for younger people, you're never going to hit the mark for younger generations. Okay? And my last statement is that please pass the torch, adults. Like, it's it's really okay to step down and like build leaders from, you know, like whatever it is that you are really great at. Give that to us too, so we don't lose that passion, so we don't lose those resources. Really, authentically, because untapped young adults become untapped adults. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. Okay, so the question that I wanted to ask is that how do you merge those intergenerationally with those on the ground and those in those professional spaces?
What was the question?
Say it again.
Did I hear it correctly? How do you connect the grassroots folks and professional folks?
Yes, especially intergenerationally, because we hear so much word. We hear that word so often, but we don't really see it activated until it's convenient. But how do you merge those within the professional space with those on the ground and urge intergenerationally work?
Okay, so hang on. How do we connect build that relationship and bridge from folks on the ground
Yes.
and folks that are in professions or technical roles
okay.
or governing roles, but intergenerationally?
Got it.
Okay, so that's one great question. Thanks. Let's get a couple of more. Yes.
Thank you all too. My name is Rosebud, Atlanta, Georgia, community leader with OIU. You said a lot about storytelling, and I shared with my table mates here that I felt like storytelling was a little bit like black matter, right? The stuff that's holding everything together. And so in exploring that, you know, isolating, or not necessarily isolating, but highlighting storytelling, leveraging it to like create a continuum in the movement, how do you at the same time protect the face of the movement with the intergenerational work, because it is important to pass the legacy, to use storytelling in that way too, even in ways that you guys would use storytelling to call out strategic impact and litigation opportunities. You would, use stories to really figure out how you can create opportunities to fight for these very larger, impactful situations. But in doing that, you're working with intergenerational people. I think that the movement at this point needs a younger face on it. How do you set it up to live for another 2 decades? Where as we're mixing these intergenerations, as we're passing off the baton, as the work is being relearned, how do we keep corporations and bad actors from looting the industry, becoming the face of what we're doing, and kind of creating a stop, I suppose? Or, how do you mitigate them from creating a stop?
Hi, I'm Alex PA from One's Up. I've been doing this work with my organization for a while now, since I was 19. And my buddy Leon over there reminded me that I'm going to be getting a little bit older now in my work. But from being 19 and really trying to help young people turn their passion to their profession, I was committed to this. I was supposed to go to law school, decided not to, and moved to Philly so I could really work on this thing. And I got rejected from grants, denied, because I didn't figure the language out, or because your board members make the decisions and all these things. And I got pissed off, almost gave up, almost quit, because literally no one is giving us money. I had to do a whole earned income model just so I could serve my young people in my program. And there's a lot was going on there for a number of years. And out of nowhere, we started to raise money. And during the pandemic, we raised over $2 million through all this time. It's little for us, right? Because of the big need. But the reason why I say all this stuff is it took me way too long to get here. And I'm realizing now, being at this conference, I've met so many young people who are now in their 20s, and I'm like, oh my gosh, they remind me of what I used to be with the energy. But they have the ideas that's going to change our country, their cities. They don't have no idea what measuring outcomes means. They don't have a deck. They just know that there's a need and I want change. What is philanthropy going to do to stop giving money to the old guard and start taking risks and giving money directly to young people? And I'm not talking about $500. I'm talking about the same money you're giving the foundation, the organizations you fund. Why not believe in our young people? Not only give them money, but the resources, the trainings, and these opportunities come over here so that actually can sustain their work. I think that's a really important thing because I don't want them to have to go through what I had to go through just to get to where I am. And I'm tired of trying to teach them things, and I can't give no money, but I can teach you what I know. But I really feel like philanthropy has a huge responsibility in investing money, not to organizations to serve just young people, but just give the money to the young people themselves. So I really want to know what is going on with philanthropy to really start investing directly to young people with their ideas to really help transform communities.
Great, thanks. Okay, so let me just thank you everybody for those questions. Let me summarize them and then have you guys jump in. So the first question is really like, how do we build that bridge between folks on the ground, intergenerationally, with folks kind of in the governing or technical space, right? The second, I think I'm heard this correctly, which is, storytelling, narrative is critical, and how do we create those that really endure, but in a way that is not co-opted by folks that might be down with the equity agenda, right? Which is a challenge, right? Because as you shared, right, like in terms of corporate leaders coming forward, but really not committed, right? So how do we kind of balance that? And the third, and Fred, I'd love your thoughts on this too, is what are you seeing within philanthropy that is trying to be much more connected to power builders, youth organizations that may not have all that infrastructure that philanthropy typically requires, right? Then we'll get to you guys after this round.
I'll take the first one about how to be able to connect the work to the people who have the wisdom and the knowledge about what needs to happen. That has been my driver throughout my entire career. I had the good fortune to start off as an organizer, and that was good fortune because when you start off as an organizer, all power is with the people. I mean, that is just the mindset that you bring. The power is with the people. And how do you work with the people? How do you force yourself to become as authentic as you possibly can so that you can, in partnership, help to change some things? So that's how I started off. In Harlem, organizing, and then in Los Angeles, organizing. Then I became a public interest lawyer for 10 years. And as a public interest lawyer doing impact litigation, we represented community-based organizations that claimed that they were representing the people. And I can remember good cases that we worked on and good victories that we made, but the truth of the matter was we were developing the strategies in the conference room at the public interest law firm. And we were then getting the organizations to be the plaintiffs so that we could have the appearance of authenticity when we went into court. And when we won something, it was often kind of sad because the community would get organized about creating a voice to support the case. But when the case was won years later, the community wasn't thinking about it anymore, and there was nobody to hold the systems accountable that we have been able to sue in court. That led me to start the Urban Strategies Council, which moved away, yay, to move away from the litigation to go back to community. To go back to community, actually trying to find that connection again, and to bring the kind of resources I'd seen in terms of advocacy from the litigation, and that I'd seen nationally in terms of groups like the Children's Defense Fund and the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, bringing good policy work to a single community to create that. And we did some really good work. When I started PolicyLink, we started it for the purpose of connecting the wisdom, voice, and experience of people working for change in their local communities to the world of policy. And it was, again, an articulation of making that connection. And I can't underscore for you how hard it is. I cannot underscore for you how hard it is. The main thing to do is to always do your work by asking, what are the people whose lives you hope are going to be impacted? What do they have to say about this? How would they go about it? What's the critique that they have? That helps you. But unless you are working directly with organizations and with people who are mobilizing and organizing in their communities, you cannot do it. So my answer to your question is, it's the right question to ask. And the only way that you can do it is if you recognize that no gain that you make will have the lasting power that you are hoping for if you have lost that linkage. And once you know that, you'll figure out a way to be able to do it. You'll figure out a way to do it, but you have to believe that it's important.
Right. I guess it would probably be appropriate for me to take the philanthropy question. And I have a few thoughts here. The first is that I may not be the best person to ask, and you'll appreciate this, Ray, because I actually don't spend a lot of time with foundations and foundation leaders who are continuing to perpetuate the wrong approach to working in community. I don't, those aren't the rooms I'm in anymore. And the reason why I'm not in that room a lot is because I have found rooms of folks who share the perspective. And so I'll just name a couple of examples. Bob Ross at the endowment has put together a kitchen cabinet of young people that advise him around strategy at the endowment. That is a different way of engaging young people. He's done that. It drives a lot of the decision making that he makes at the foundation, and he comes with some radical ideas that come from those meetings. Another woman, fabulous hero of mine, Shane Goldsmith at the Liberty Hill Foundation in Southern California, has been working with a coalition of folks who are working directly with young people in LA to close down juvenile hall and to get resources into the hands of the youth organizers that are advancing that work and really doing it in ways that invest in them with the assumption that she wants them to win, and that coalition of foundations wants them to win. We are part of a coalition of folks who are doing similar kind of work up here in the Bay Area. And so I could think of a lot of examples, and it's not an accident that you have received that support in this moment and during the pandemic. And it goes back to a point that I made earlier. That didn't come from folks going to boardrooms and having PowerPoint presentations. That came from folks in the streets demanding change across a variety of sectors. It isn't coming from folks showing up in the board meeting with the PowerPoint, like I said earlier. It comes from pressure from community to hold folks with resources accountable to getting those resources in the right place and to do it swiftly. I haven't seen the kind of investment that I've seen over the last couple of years in organizations that are Black-led, youth-led, BIPOC-led that I have seen in the last couple of years. And I'm convinced that now that that door is open, things are going to change. But And there are a couple of other things that have changed. I've seen more trust-based philanthropy. I've seen the aggregation of dollars, the California Black Freedom Fund going out and gathering $100 million to support Black-led organizations, and not just Black-led organizations that are pursuing power-building strategies towards transformative change. And so the moment has created a different kind of posture. And the question, I think, is how do we maintain that? How do we keep the pressure on folks like me and others who sits in seats like mine to continue to advance that work? And how do we grow the cadre of people who are engaged in that work so that there are more rooms that I can enter where people are thinking and talking like Ray and I are thinking and talking? Because I think that we probably have a little bit of a false sense of security because we're always in the room together. But we are not in the rooms with folks who are really pulling the purse strings and is still going about it the same old way.
I want to say a word about passing the baton, because I think that is, it didn't come in the form of a question, it became in the form of a directive. Pass the baton. But I want to talk about passing the baton because there is a danger in just embracing that without thinking about what you're throwing away. There's nothing, this change work is not a zero-sum game either. Do you know, in order to make change, you need the full array of people. I have been doing this work for 50 years, and I have learned a lot over the course of that 50 years, and there's no reason for me to just shut my mouth and say, you know, 47 years was enough, boom, don't speak again, not needed. But you need to be able to hear it, and Fred has just described 3 times now that real change doesn't happen until it is demanded, and demanded in a way that can be heard. And the people who have the power, the courage, the impatience to be able to make that demand are often younger. And they need to be able to be in this fight. And we need to be able to have people who've been in it for a long time to be able to add to it. The baton comes from an image of a race where you're passing the baton. You don't throw that baton. You don't put that baton down and wait for somebody to come and pick it up. You literally do pass the baton. And as you pass the baton, you're continuing to run a little bit as you see the person go. And you might come around again and have to pick up the baton again. And so let's just not assume that we've got anybody we can throw away. But let's also not assume that some people can work on a penny and some people can only work on 1,000. Everybody needs to have the resources they need to be able to give their piece fully.
Can I just add one brief thing to that, Ray? I can't tell you how heartbreaking it is to see some of the folks who have spent their 50 years in this work and have no way to sustain themselves. And you know, that is another part of the conversation about philanthropy that we have to have. But in order for people to pass the baton and in order for people to move on, they got to have some place to go, and that shouldn't be into poverty.
That's right. That's right. That's right. We got a lot of work to do in philanthropy still. Monique, can we get 5 minutes? Okay, so let's take a couple more questions from those 2 young men over there, and then we'll wrap up. Oh, and one over here.
All right. Talking about passing the baton. Hello, everybody. I'm Cole Stevens from Bridgemakers, the resident 20-year-old nonprofit leader. And DJ, come on, stand up, bro. And I got my man DJ with me here too. So, Alex, bro, thank you for leading in with that, because I want to talk a little bit about paying the actual young people, investing directly into young people. Investing directly. We are what happens when you invest directly to young people. Bridgemakers, we raise the money. We handle the budget. And literally, half of us are not even legally able to drink. That's how youth-led we are. That's how youth-led we are, bro. Man. And so when we talk about how to really engage youth, it should be the young people that's engaging young people, the peer mentorship that's going on there, and adults supporting that. So we do that, man. So I was going to say a little bit about that. Number one, I also want to engage the point that we need the resources and the mentorship from our elders and from those who have, I mean, that's intergenerational is the way to do it. Let the youth lead, but please teach us. We want to grow. We want to grow. So when I say invest directly into young people and those who want to start organizations. Mentor them, teach them about how to start an actual impactful and an organization that can have longevity, right? So that things don't burn out. I mean, we weren't taught this stuff in school. So please, the mentors, we ask of you. So anyway, solutions though, coming forward, we got our own Youth Leadership Summit, but it's the Youth-Led Youth Summit. So please come through to hear more about that. We're inviting everybody out to Minnesota to build this movement together, but my boy DJ has really got the solutions, and I want to pass it over to him. DJ, thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Cole. Thank you, Cole, for the beautiful intro. So as we speak on solutions, I'm leading a First in the Nation project, an initiative to utilize middle school as a preventive service for juvenile justice. Out of Minnesota and only out of Minnesota. A little bit of background, Minnesota is the home of charter schools, alternative schools. We like to utilize and individualize schooling to help with youth progress. We want them to grow more. And being a youth, being 23 years old, working with 20-year-olds, also executive director of a nonprofit in Minnesota, our goal is to spread our message everywhere. We want to go national and global and really push the idea of youth getting paid and getting those resources and also getting the mentorship from you guys. And that's it.
Thanks, brother. Okay.
And the last thing I want to say is I don't know how you got that 50 years of experience in 15 because you don't look a day over 35.
Yeah, you look great.
Right, Angela. You still have a question? Okay, thanks for those comments, you all. Okay, final note from Angela and Fred. So if you think back when you were starting out and you had the opportunity to give yourself advice, now, 50 years later or 30 years later, Fred, what would be your advice to your younger self?
It's so interesting. This is the question I'm asking at the end of my podcast. I have a podcast, y'all. It's called Radical Imagination. Check it out. And we're asking that question at the end now. Nobody ever asked me before, though. My advice would be stay angry. That would be my advice, stay angry. I think that losing the anger is not useful when you are addressing injustice. Coming off angry is different from staying angry.
That's good.
Thanks, son.
Who here works out? My advice to my younger self would be don't skip leg day. And let me just explain what I mean by that. A lot of us kind of go to the gym and we spend a lot of time on our chest and our arms and kind of getting buffed. And we've all seen that dude in the gym who's buffed and then has the skinny legs. The equivalent to that in our work is to focus in on all of the sexy stuff, the things that are about kind of getting attention and stuff like that without paying attention to the foundation. In other words, to run an effective organization, it takes a lot of charisma, it takes the public speaking, it takes all that stuff, but it takes being able to run a damn organization. Mm-hmm. The non-sexy stuff that is about getting your finances straight, making sure the IRS isn't coming to your door, all that stuff, that's leg day. Yes. Don't skip leg day, y'all.
And my advice to my younger self is, and to you, is embrace joy. Bring that into your work, joy.
Yay.
Let's thank Angela and Fred.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right, and thank you, Ray. That was a family affair for sure. Thank you, guys. That was beautiful. I just have one mission, but I can't resist. First, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree in the Blackwell family, huh? Second, I just want to we acknowledge Karen Pittman, that the words positive youth development don't work in this world without Karen Pittman. Racial equity is not a term we use without Angela Glover Blackwell. So, you know, I don't even know when it was that she wrote equity is the best growth model, but she has done the work for 47 years, but yet she's still 35 or whatever it's been. So thank you, Angela Glover Blackwell, Fred Blackwell, and Ray Colmenar, who's an honorary family member over there, and that was amazing. My only other job is to say we have a nice break, and then we're back here at 2:15. 2:15 back here. I hear it is sunny in California. I plan on finding out. I recommend you do as well. But wow, see you back here at 2:15, and that's gonna be powerful, so don't miss it. Thanks, everybody.